Then welcome to the KCP community meeting on the 12th of February. Before we get started, this call is being recorded and transcribed, and it follows the CNCF governance, which boils down to let's be excellent to each other. Before we get started, I do see we have a couple of new faces. If you would like to introduce yourself, please do so. We would love to hear a bit more about you.
I'll go quickly first. Hello, everybody. My name is Ljubomir. I joined the Kubernetes project around 9 years ago, and I have been in the cluster lifecycle area. Recently, I joined Kubermatic, and I will be visiting the KCP project from time to time as I work on downstream product that uses KCP. I am a complete noob to KCP. I managed to learn a few things, browsing the code base and trying to fix some tests, but I may have some questions for you, topics that I can bring in the future. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, okay, I will go next. My name is Felix Tomvik. I'm an engineer working at Stackator. We're also building downstream products on top of KCP, so I'm probably also going to join here, or at least hover in the Slack channels. Yeah, basically bugging you about problems and seeing maybe if we can contribute here and there.
Very nice. Thanks. Nice to meet you both. Then for any attendees, as always, if you want to add yourself as an attendee to the meeting notes, you can do so. And then we'll get started. And I hand over to Felix. You have the first topic.
Yes. So we are, as I said, we're building basically you can call it a hyperscaler cloud infrastructure product based on KCP, where we are hosting, for now, VM as a service and OpenShift as a service. As a part of this, we want to support the customers connecting through the serial console of the KubeVirt virtual machines. This is in the native Kubernetes supported through they are doing API aggregation through the API service object. So they're routing basically the whole subpath to a different API server, which is handled by the KubeVirt, and basically routing then all of the RBAC through the API server. So I did see a pull request open for or an issue open for this that the Gartner people also seem to have been interested in. And I can see like the connect and the restart verbs or the paths specifically are mentioned. So I do think that we have basically the same underlying requirement here. So my question right now, I mean, this is probably a pretty big undertaking. My question right now is more in an exploratory sense, and basically from your end also, like, is this, if we were to put in some effort here, what would that look like? Are you prepared to put in the effort to review this and to kind of work with us to deduce these requirements and such? Because as they are not supported natively by Kubernetes and it doesn't work this way, this will kind of stray potentially a little bit from how the native Kubernetes API work. So there are potentially a couple of hard decisions that need to be made here in regards to how the KCP works in the API layer versus the upstream Kubernetes. So, I mean, specific things just off the top of my head from my basic research here, like sub-objects creates like a huge headache because we need to track, we need to basically maintain this, which fields are part of a sub-object ourselves if they don't exist in the underlying Kubernetes objects. So, yeah, I mean, getting into specifics at this stage is not very productive, I would say. So I'm more interested in hearing have there been any discussions before about this? Where did they land? Are they like, yeah, basically, where are you at? How do you view this functionality and this issue from the point of view of the KCP project?
Yeah, I think I can cover this because I was the original author of the issue. So we had some conversations internally. So like that, not every API will adhere to the Kube API. Terminal SSH was basically to the spot what you mentioned. And we just been spitballing the solution that we could extend an API resource schema in KCP to support some sub-resources and think of some routing logic from the front proxy directly to the URLs on the objects itself, like where the URL's coming from, it's still TBD. Like it could be hosted on the original object, like a virtual machine has a status connect URL, which should match with API resource, sub-resource name, something like that. So, and I think I had some gist which we explored in some DMs. I can post it in the issue. But the answer to your original question, yes, there is a need for that. Yes, there is a desire for that. I think we would need some kind of mini enhancement document in our enhancement repo. We're trying to really revamp those again of how this could look like, what the changes would be needed at a high level. And we basically iterate from there. So if you want to work on this, I think we can work on this together and basically try to push it forward.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so I will go through the enhancements repository. I will look at the current document structure and basically come up with something, and then we can use that as the basis, and we can kind of take it from there and see what else is required and yeah, whatnot.
I'm gonna try to clean the node guests and paste in the same issue like someday tomorrow morning.
Yeah, perfect.
Exactly. And once it has reached a stage, we can definitely either review it like a standard pull request, or we could also have like a discussion in a community call as well, if that's required. So once you get to like a state where you say, hey, this is ready for someone else to have a look at, let us know. It's definitely desired and it's interesting as well. Okay, then the next topic has been created by Nilo, and Nilo, I just see one word, tied. What?
I think maybe that's partially now resolved because Christoph set up a cron job that just kills Tide every night so that it kicks back in. But the start of this discussion was between MJ and me that maybe we should move Tide into the Oracle infrastructure where everyone from the admin team can access it and work on it in case that there's something going on. That was the trigger of putting this there. I don't think there's an immediate need for this now because it's being restarted every night, but it could be a similar situation in the future where people that have access to Tide are not available, but we need access to Tide to do some kind of maintenance. MJ?
Yeah, just for people not aware, like some of our CI infrastructure is hosted by Kubernetes, and we have some of that in Oracle Cloud hosted by CNCF. The challenge arose when the Kubernetes were on offsite for a week and things went down and we was not working for a few days. So thinking if the Oracle is there to stay from CNCF, maybe we just consolidate everything in there. So we have it across the board access, I mean.
One of the big reasons for splitting is that the Pro cluster has the GitHub root token. If we move everything into OCI, then anyone with just any access to our infrastructure can basically nuke the entire GitHub organization. So I can't make that decision.
Mm.
I see how this could be a little bit annoying. However, besides that one tight issue, Huawei is really solid. And I wouldn't just take this as the reason for, oh yeah, let's just give everyone access to Tide. Let's merge all the infras.
Question. Yeah.
It's a bit overreaching, I think. And I don't know, but I don't think you can just run Tide alone, standalone. That doesn't make sense. Tide needs the GitHub token to merge stuff. It would need the GitHub proxy and everything. So yeah, I would be hesitant. And it's certainly not my decision to make this. Lumia, you had your hand up first.
I just want to mention that upstream communities had a similar problem many years ago. It started with Google. A company was owning the infrastructure. I think Marco is very familiar with this, by the way. We have basically running a lot of stuff still on Google owned infrastructure, but we created a special interest group specifically to own this and to migrate stuff from Google owned infra to the CNCF owned infra with credits, sponsorship. Basically, there's no longer a case where a single company, we have to go and poke someone from Google to do a release for us or something like that. So I think that we have a similar situation here, basically, and it has to change. I don't know who can help, but just wanted to share this detail.
I think we need to understand how Oracle Cloud Access model is happening now. Like, as much as I'm aware, only 4 global admins has the access now in there. It's basically me, Stefan, Marvin, and Christoph. Which is, I think, is enough to have it distributed twice. Like, none of us 4 working with the same organization anymore. And either way, I think root token should be secure in that case. If we start adding everybody in that account, I would be worried, but I think at this point it should be fine.
Sorry, I have a really dumb in-between question. Why does Tide require such a powerful token that can nuke the whole organization?
Because Tide can do many things, and that's just how we always want Pro. Like, we also use the token in our infrastructure to run Peribolos, I don't know, to sync our GitHub teams and organization and create repositories and do all that stuff. So that's why we have a standalone, highly privileged cluster that does these things for our infrastructure, not necessarily for KCP. But that's the model we copied.
Yeah, I get it. I'm just questioning if the only reason we have it that it's such a powerful token, that's the only thing that keeps us from moving. The question is, can we move the token less powerful? Or alternatively, we can also go ahead and maybe expand the access a tiny little bit. Like, it's like more than 4 people, maybe, just in case. Like, I understand that everyone should not have access to it, but just to be like fail safe. That would at least be my argument then.
So these 4, we voted in a governance model, basically, because that's we have a bit higher access in a GitHub and everywhere. So if we want to add more, it's a standard governance model. But so I think even the move stuff, like, I'm pro of moving everything to Oracle Cloud if Oracle Cloud is here to stay. So yeah,
I have no strong feelings. I won't be hurt in the rear end if we move Pro. You're not taking away my baby or something. So yeah, again, I would be queasy with the GitHub token, but yeah, we only have a few people in Oracle, but for us, it was different in our environment, because in our environment, every employee gets access to the CI cluster to debug E2E tests. So that's why we could not have just everything in the CI cluster.
no, we don't have that. So
Okay, then I'm going to write down that we are fine with moving it to Oracle. Who creates, do we track this like as a regular issue, or is that too sensitive? No, right, that's fine.
no, I think it's the issue and we just track it there.
Okay, who creates the issue? I'm just going to type it down. Volunteers.
Can open the ticket.
Yeah, it's not. I kind of suspect Christoph only the one who knows how to move the stuff because he can see the things in there.
I mean,
Yeah, we'll probably start with the second parallel pour, see if that works, and then switch
Yeah.
over.
But it's a good learning stuff because like I'm not even aware of that setup and how it's done, and it's just been black box.
I was about to ask, I would love to join when we move this thing, like as an observer.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oops, sorry, Christoph, go ahead.
No. We're good. You're just expecting too much. It's just a few deployments and like 3-4 secrets. That's it.
Yeah, but you know, to us, this is the mysterious side that we don't get to see. Okay, moving on. MJ, you have the next topic.
So where's my window? So we've been brewing this idea of having a bit different workspace architecture available on KCP. So currently everything what you do is available on the root workspace. Technically, there is no technical reasons apart lack of implementation in a backend, which one could consider technical reason, but yeah, you could have many roots, like a forest type of structure. So there is a mini enhancement proposal to add a new API under maybe even tenancy APIs, like workspace root, where if one would create a workspace root object, it basically acts very similarly like workspace. Better? Yeah. I really hate this GitHub view.
Can you click on the 3 dots and just click on View File? And then
Oh, way nicer. Okay. So just a high level view is like if one would create a workspace root, it would act very similarly like workspace, but it creates an object which is not based on a root. So it creates a trunk. So it's my asset diagram. Here we go. So you could have a dedicated workspace where you keep objects and you have many workspace root objects, which provisions a dedicated trees in there. So technically, there is nothing in a system, as much as I'm aware, preventing this working. Like API bindings works cross trees, API export works, everything works. I had an implementation in a POC manner to prove it. The only difference is that we have these CLI handlers that I think they've been fixed when you do use semicolon, basically just should go to your current root. And while it doesn't solve like actual big problem, it's a very much semantic change. It allows a nicer way to organize your workspaces, where instead of having everything in the root orgs, you could have a root dedicated to the system management, and you put all your tenants in a separate trees. So it's a ability to organize things in a more nicer way. And there was I just wanted to open this for wider community discussion, what people think about this and if we should progress with this. Christoph?
yeah, if this is part of the tenancy API, does this mean that this works everywhere? If I give my team a workspace, they create a sub workspace, and can they then just request their own workspace tree? Or is it limited to, should we maybe have this in a new API group that's only in the root workspace?
again, that's up for discussion. It's like we can make it
That's what I'm
part of the
asking.
tenants APIs. Like, I know implementations where people don't expose tenants API to users because somebody else provisions workspaces and it's just out there. So in those implementations, it's not a problem. But at the same time, there is implementations out there where the tenancy API is just for grabs. So we could put it under feature flag, where it's like, if you enable this, it pops up in a tenancy, but I don't know. It's something to discuss. Like,
I would be a bit queasy if everyone could create their own workspace roots, because I also at the same time wonder about naming conflicts. What if I have two workspace root objects in different workspaces that both want the same root prefix?
and
Can
that's
I, when I do this, thereby enumerate all the existing prefixes? Because KCP will constantly tell me, nope, taken, nope, taken, nope, taken, oh, free.
and that's a very valid comment. I think it's worth splitting in a separate API group, even the small one with one API, so people can control where it's bound and who can create the stuff. Yeah, that makes sense. Lubomir?
So does it solve the question with the naming conflicts?
No, naming conflict would be for the users of these implementations. Like, you kind of need to. Yeah, it doesn't. This is why we have this. In logical clusters, logical cluster is always named cluster, but underlying implementation is base 36. And this is what was my original idea behind that name in the spec. That you can name this object, all of them full. If we live in a different workspace, you're allowed to create them. But how does it land on the root workspace? My take is that you should not have a control of that. Same like you don't have for the base 36 logical cluster. I think root workspace should just give you something random.
So as a user cannot set putty name in this case.
I would do that.
That's very good to know, because I thought that the user could choose the root name that they want.
In a current way, as we went through the few iterations in this document, user can set a pretty name, like a name itself. But I'm thinking again that maybe that was a bad. I kind of compromised on the suggestions. Niloy has raised his hand because he was suggesting that user can choose the names. So I think, yeah, Niloy.
I think we should find a different solution, because even if we say, yeah, we're just going to give, we're just going to hand out a name, we need some kind of way to detect clashes, because they can happen anyway in some way, shape, or form. So I would say, and I see more value in being letting the users decide what their root is named, and if they want to make this just a random hash, they can, or random string, and they can do that. So we should not break the conventions with name and generate name and stuff. So yeah, I think it should be a proper name.
But that's what I was saying. Objects. So first of all, for the clashes, we use this base 36 across the system in KCP. I think we should use the same. Like, if we're gonna get clashes, we already have this challenge in our system. There is some way in a code math which proves that.
But that doesn't solve the problem of the addressing, because but I would prefer is that if I run a KCP instance and I use the forest and I say I want to have like 3 trees or 4 trees or 5 trees, then I would like to, much like I do now with the breadcrumbs for the workspaces from root, I would then also like to be able to say, I don't know, team A, and then the breadcrumbs of workspaces after that. I would not want to have to remember XZ1 F5J, whatever. That's not nice, especially not for testing purposes. I just want to be able to say I create a root and it has this name. And in production, if someone is doing this for like hundreds of people and they want to obfuscate the actual names of the roots, then they can do the hashing themselves.
I think I would do the other way around. Hashing by default, if you provide a name, you get a name. Not the other way around. Like a logical cluster gives you a random hash by default.
That logical cluster hides
but
behind the workspace, and the workspace has a proper name.
Yeah, but that's the thing. That was with the mount stuff we had a conversation. Like, in theory, we could enable somebody to create something like root my forest first, which mounts to not a first, but arbitrary hash. Like a soft linking in a Linux system, where you could have a home dir which points to some random file system name. So we can create this ability to have symlinks, which basically just points to random hashes. But I can have a feeling if we leave this name by default, hash by opt-in, somebody will enable this for everybody and will just splash in.
What I mean with they can hash it is that they can create their items with the hashed name. Not that we have a like a Boolean where we say, oh yeah, if this is set, then we hash this, but rather we take the object name as it is, and that is the root name that is used in KCP. And if the user says, okay, we want to obfuscate our root names, and they hash whatever they have as input before and give KCP that as the name. That's what I mean.
I disagree. Because I think like you will run into problem that somebody binds a workspace root API into 2 workspaces, and now 2 users create 2 workspace roots with the name dev, because they both want to have a root prefix dev, and then you have a clash.
And then the first one will get its the logical cluster, so first come, first serve, and the second one will get a status, hey, this name's taken, sorry.
No, but that's what I want to avoid. I would say everybody gets hash by default. If you want to, like, if I do in a CLI more like create workspace tree, you get like random prefix allocated. If you want pretty name, maybe make it even teacher flag in a system where pretty names for workspace roots has to be enabled by default by the system administrator, because having pretty name has a bigger probability of clashes. Hence, it has to be explicit opt-in like decision. So, Simon?
Yeah, so I have a question. If you now envision this thing from me reading like the point architecture of this, so the assumption would be there is like a specialized workspace that stores all the workspace roots.
Any workspace where you bind this API. Same as we have a tenancy API, which enables you to bind, which allows you to have workspaces objects. Like if you would not have a tenancy API in your workspace, you can't create workspaces. So same here. If you don't have this tenancy roots API bound to your workspace, you can't create workspace roots.
Okay, but in your model, basically, if someone inside root orgs workspace roots creates a workspace root, then they get a top level logical cluster out of it at the end of the day.
Yes.
Yes. And anyone from anywhere can provision these. Oh.
Anywhere where the system administrator bound API.
And I'm assuming then at least at that logical cluster, we would somehow keep a reference where the workspace root comes from, I guess, because otherwise we'll go bananas.
Yes, that's basically the root workspace root object has to has a reference to where basically this guy is. So in the spec somewhere, in the same logic, it has a URL, maybe it has a path separately, so people would not need to parse it. But
Okay, and the use case is an organization, everyone could create public roots at any time to obfuscate basically the organizational structure.
it depends on the platform you set it. Is it anybody, or is it like in a platformer scenario, you create an account and you onboard it account, you get one prefix per organization, and any sub-accounts, like departments, that fall under the same tree.
Okay, but this would then be the model where basically a central place creates all the workspace roots.
Yeah.
In a way, or someone has to approve the workspace root. Okay. Let's go to Lubomir first. I need some moment to think about it.
I think I'm realizing that the Kubernetes API has a bit of a limitation. If you could add CD as well, if you could just have UIDs as path elements to whatever you want to reach, then you never have clashes. But then how do you access what you want? Well, with Go or any clients that you get, you can have wrappers around the UIDs, and locally you can work with them to navigate the path. So basically, the whole path is constructed of a structure of UIDs, which is supposedly unique. That path will be truly unique. You don't have to worry. You don't have to worry about clashes in that case, I would say. Just wanted to make this comment. And the other thing I wanted to ask: have you thought about how a user would migrate from not using the workspace roots to using them? Can they restructure or no?
I don't see this migration in this one.
Yeah.
Like, if you're using the current root organization and current structure, you can use it forever. It's not gonna go away, or we're not gonna change it. It just gives additional tool to your toolbox to have this additional structure.
Yeah. So could they write something that can do the migration?
And
No.
people like
There's
you could,
so
in
much.
theory.
There's so much going into because everything is based on the paths of the workspaces. So whatever integrations you have, all of that needs to be updated if you change your entire layout. Like you create an API binding, you need to update the path, and we can't write a tool that migrates that over. I would say that's work for Sisyphus essentially, because it's going and touching in so many places.
Yeah, I see.
I think in theory you could like do some Bolero style export and import, like create a digital twins, but I don't think
Yep.
I don't think you. And this is why I kind of want this to get sooner than later. More people start building on this. It's better to have this more flexibility, to have this more paths, and piling everything into one is a bit. It gets very crowded very fast. Let's put it like that. Yeah, Milo.
My last point on the naming of the independent trees, even if it's dangerous, in my humble opinion, we are just giving people tools to do stuff with. And if they chose to hit their own feet with the tools that we give them, then they can hit their own feet with the tools that we give them. I don't think that it's going to be useful for most use cases to assign forcibly assign a randomly
Yeah, but
random route.
my take is make it harder to them to hit the foot. Give them random. If somebody wants to opt out of this and do everything by name, like fine, but make them
Just
opt-in.
put it into the documentation on Workspace Root that this is intended to be one of these solutions that you can use to enhance to add obfuscation security to your workspace layouts. And if you want to do this, you might consider hashing your root names or generating random root names. I would put it like that, but I wouldn't go and decide for downstream how this should be done. For example, what I could consider is that when I am generating workspace root trees and whatever language or whatever tool I'm using has a hashing functionality, but it doesn't match the hashing functionality that we use on KCP. And we then either I have to rebuild the hashing functionality that KCP has, so I can have this one-way street from the name that I set to the name that KCP sets, or I have to start tracking the state between the name and the hash, because I don't have the ability to hash the same way KCP does. And that's why I'm saying let's just set a name, we use that name, and if the user wants to have obfuscational security, then they can have this by hashing themselves. Yeah, but if the pretty name is for access, then we are back at square one. If the pretty name is for access, then we are back to we don't have we can produce clashes. We have problems with that this is exposed to exposed to the users and so on and so forth. I don't see a value in either adding a pretty name or hashing for the user or. We just take the name that they give us. If there's a clash, then whoever comes after gets an error.
Yeah, I still disagree with this. Just because I think it's a normal cube, like you can bind it to many workspaces, means
No.
the name here, you should be able to create many same objects with the same name in a different workspaces. This one would become like hash name, or I don't know how we call it, but means if somebody provides this, we use this for the beginning. If it's empty, we give them one in a cube style in our base 36. So,
okay. Yeah.
It means I could like 5 users in their work. So imagine.
Okay, no, I mean, I know what you mean now with pretty name. I thought you meant that we still generate a random root.
No.
But okay, yeah, then it makes sense. So
because imagine situation, 5 users in their workspace trees, where in a platform where everything is allowed, Wild Wild West. So like Simon will create a dev tree for himself, and Christoph will create a dev tree for himself. They should be able to create workspace trees objects with the name dev. So they created both of them. And because we didn't provide a hash name, they get random allocated prefixes. In their both workspaces, we have these objects which points to 2 random trees. Object is named dev, same like logical cluster is named cluster, but it has a random prefix. And we could work with a CLI helper which allows to jump to workspace trees.
You are arguing that with a very, very marginal use case, I would say, with a vanishingly small use case, because I don't think that I'm going to see a KCP instance in the wild that is open to, say, or semi-open to the public, where users are able to create their own workspace tree. I don't believe that. What I do believe is that we will see the workspace tree used authoritatively by platforms, and that I see a lot. And in those cases, it doesn't really make sense to forcibly assign the prefix hash.
Yeah, but this follows this like a more of the logical cluster, less of the workspace. So maybe the name here is wrong. Maybe we just need to call it like logical root or something like that. Because logical root is nicely named object, random backing. And I propose the same here, if not specified differently. Where workspace is nicely named, points to logical cluster. And I don't want to have like, okay, I'm conscious the feature is there. You propose it and disable by default. I propose it enable by default, or other way around. So I'm wondering what other people think. Don't talk everybody at once. Lubomir.
Yeah, just my quick intuition, because I don't understand the entirety of the project. I would probably go with just what Nivo said. I'm going to name the field name, and if they want to obfuscate, they can do it. This is my intuition. Do we have other instances in KCP where something has a pretty name, or is this the first one?
So logical cluster is like that. Logical cluster is a singleton, always named cluster, where it's backed by random prefix because of the collisions. Like you have many of the same objects, which.
So if it's not a precedence, in that case, I could change my opinion so that this can make sense, so that you continue with the pattern that is already established to avoid collisions.
It's simple as that. In my whole argument is make collisions harder to happen, not easier.
Yeah, and you have to understand also that by making collisions harder to happen, the user should not be confused about the prefixes. They will have to know about them, right? And if there's already other places that employ a similar mechanism, then the user already knows about this, right?
I mean, 50-50. I think in this particular instance, the way it works, right, is you would create a workspace root with a name that you like, and then it provisions a randomly generated root, and you would basically need to look up in the workspace root what that random generated string is. And I do think that this is not something we have so far, because an end user at the moment never looks up the name of a logical cluster or that unique prefix. They work on pretty names. They work like kubectl, workspace, blah, blah, and that is a name they choose. Like essentially they choose the name for it. Yes, the path is maybe a little bit predetermined, but essentially they choose what they want to address it. And for this, they don't look it up. So I don't think it's, yeah, I'm not super happy with it, but I also don't have like a super strong opinion. I don't like it. But
that prefix lands into TCD that is 10 to collisions. Like I want to have randomness by default, not by randomness by opt-in. And like I don't do this often, but this is something I just can't compromise on. Sorry, like if somebody can create 2 dev workspaces and it lands as 2 dev trees by default, I don't think that's a good system behavior by default.
The thing is, we need to consider clashes anyhow, because even if we use randomness, we will hit the point at some place where the IDs hit. So we need to verify that when a workspace root is created, that the ID generated for that doesn't already exist. The same can then be used to verify if someone creates a workspace root with a specific name, if this name already exists. And if it already exists, then you just put the status there that says, hey, not possible, because that root with that name is already given, already exists.
The challenge is cache server. Okay, logical cluster sits in a M2 shards. So like if two distributed shards globally at the same time creates a dev prefix, basically, and
You
we
do
say,
it.
okay,
You do
you
it
allow-
like any other other system that synchronizes. You
they
put a
will-
claim in.
No, they both will allow to create it because the claim is validated using from local informer and all back to cache server.
That's
the
why
two
when you
shard-
have a distributed cache, you have a master that you can refer to that holds a single source of truth. If we have a distributed cache system in place, then you need to contact the
No.
master if you want to write authoritatively.
That's not how it works in KCP currently. The thing
Yeah.
is, if the two shards create the same at the same time, both of them will try to push their results to the cache server and say like, I got created. But first of all, what happens is there is no locking in there. And it's same happening now with the logical clusters. There is no locking. So is this exists? No. I'm gonna create it. So if two things happens at the same time, and that's why we have randomness by default in logical clusters to avoid collisions. Like you can't opt into the name logical cluster foo.
But that
Because
just
this-
means that we need to fix the cache, because we can't guarantee for every installation until forever that we are never going to have a
That's
conflict.
why we have base 36, which is very close to what UID has amount of collisions. Like we know this eventual consistency. We know that theoretically on a paper we can have a collision. We accept it very early in a project lifecycle. We can live with this risk of having this collision. As a consequence, you can get your own prefix, because if somebody starts prefixing, you get a risk is way higher, which is I don't think we can accept it. And because this lands in the same line of area, I honestly don't even want to allow hash like a names. I think it basically added the wrong discussion topic to this. Like it just should be random always. You get a random prefix, period. Because else we need to refactor our system from the core, and that's not the topic for this conversation.
Sorry to interrupt, because as the moderator for one moment, because we have two more topics on the agenda. I want to ask Lubomir and Christoph if any of these topics, if we could move them to next community meeting, or if from your side they are urgent and we should give a talk, because I'm also feeling we're reaching kind of a stalemate situation with this at the moment with both sides. So Lubomir, Christoph,
Mine can be moved. Yeah,
this
sure.
will be moved, okay?
Mine is a couple of minutes questions. It's not so much, but if you want, we can have it now. And if not, I can wait.
So we can close this as soon as possible. Like, how should we progress with this one? Because like
I think we need to sleep on it.
Yes.
That's the first one.
Okay.
And the second, we need to talk more about this and implications and other options. Yeah. So let's close
let's
this here
check.
for now.
Let's try to discuss this synchronously, and if needed, we can rediscuss next community meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna write that down. So Okay, then Lubomir, you have the next topic.
Yeah, just I was trying to update from V1 Alpha 1 to V1 Alpha 2, and I saw that the API resource schema no longer exists in V1 Alpha 2, and I was very confused why this is happening. And I consulted Christoph, and he explains to me that I still have to create the V1 Alpha 1 API schema, and then I can proceed creating the new API export from V1 Alpha 2. And apparently there exists this coupling between the two APIs, and I have to say that I have not seen this in anything related to Kubernetes ever. Do you have any context why this is happening? And also the other follow-up question is, maybe can we fix this in V1 Beta 1, which is hopefully going to be the next API?
I think the reason behind that was to save effort. We said that only put resources into the new API version that actually have changes, so we save some work. Because KCP, as you know, doesn't have the common base type that is shared across all API versions. So we don't have that as our hub version for conversions. That's a lot of versions. So yeah, that's, I think, the only strong reason we had is we thought it saved us work. Right, guys? I think that, Marco.
I agree with Christoph there. It was actually when we were adding API export, API bindings with V1 Alpha 2, quite a lot of work and a lot of things break. Before adding any of the new APIs, I think we should definitely consider having internal type, because that would make migrations and things like that easier. And I think that's pretty much any Kubernetes API has the internal type, so it is much easier for them to do things like that. But ideally, yeah, we should do, like, I would personally like to see that APIs follow, so we don't have one in V1 Alpha 1 and then that is referred in V1 Alpha 2. That doesn't make sense. That's confusing. But it was too much effort to try to streamline everything the way it is right now.
So I go first. Also, I think the thought was that if we now make a cut with version Alpha 2 and copy every resource over, the moment we want to make an actual change to API resource schemas, following that pattern, we would have to create Alpha 3 already. And so we just skipped it. Right?
Yeah, that's not 100% true. Like, you only need to do an API version if you're changing an existing type or removing fields. Like, if you're adding anything new, you can keep the API version.
Okay. So yeah, that's the background, as far as I know. I would also welcome a single API version with all resources in it. I think that's also easier to understand.
Yeah, having the internal version makes sense. It would be the stepping stone, and you can have any flexibility around conversion that is difficult without it. You have to also, one annoying part of internal versions is that you literally sometimes have to copy a lot of stuff inside of it, and you have to maintain all the comments, and it has to represent both API versions in a way. It's a little bit annoying, but it will avoid this problem, I guess. So, do you have any timeline or plans? I saw this ticket work by Sebastian last year. Do you know when hopefully there will be a beta?
Yeah, if we think that as a community, if we think that our APIs are stable enough, we could progress it and promote it. But that again raises the question, like, what do we do when we need to add a new API? Do we add immediately to beta, or we start again, like in a new API? I think we're not yet quite there.
I'm actually, I don't remember who I shared this with in Kubernetes, but I'm a big proponent of naming things with V1, V2, V3, and so on. And then whether it is experimental or not, you can document it. Yeah, but if you consider it's kind of stable at this point, V1 beta 1 makes sense, and the next one could be again V1 beta 2 if you want to continue tagging it experimental, or you can be brave and continue to just put a V1 on it, and that's all.
To be honest, I am not 100% certain on the exact API semantic differences between alpha changes and beta changes and stable version changes. So I would also tend to lean to agree that I don't see much value in subdividing everything in alpha, beta, and stuff.
One of the biggest, at least upstream Kubernetes, I think KCP probably does not follow that because you have a alpha that is already used in production. One of the things that upstream Kubernetes does, the deprecation policy, is that alpha API is supposed to be removed in one release. Also, if you imagine the kube proxy configuration is V1 alpha 1 for 10 years. So it kind of changes the policy according to the usage.
Yeah, I posted the link to what Lubomir said, so there's more details there for those who are interested. Nilo.
There's someone who only recently came into Kubernetes. This whole V1 alpha 1, V1 beta 1, V1 stuff was super odd anyway. I was never the biggest fan of this type of versioning. It is what it is. I also think if a singular API should have a singular version, and then you should just move on from that. If we have a V2 at some point, then I don't think that it's a problem. Yeah, my 2 cents. It's odd, and we don't really need to adhere to the rest of the ecosystem in everything, especially something that's essentially just a string. My 2 cents.
Yeah, I think the cloud native space has already gone used to seeing alphas and betas in production. And I also, when I joined Kubernetes, I was very surprised about that. And I don't think anybody cares. So if we can just release a V1 and whatever stability it has, I'm fine with that. Just wanted to say. Thank you for the answers.
Okay, then I think we are on time. Because we would move your topic to next community meeting. As always, thank everyone for joining and wish you a nice rest of the day.
Thanks. You too, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.